It's just another school day in the city of Tokyo, Japan, and Makoto Misumi, an average Japanese high schooler, is seen in after-school archery practice. He gets back home after practice, and in a few hours' time, he takes his bath and reads his dad's new book release. He gets a little tired and lays on his bed to sleep when suddenly, he gets teleported into limbo, a world with different shimmers, stars, and colors. A confused Makoto floats around the world and searches for any sign of his room. The god of the night, Tsukuyomi, appears to him and informs Makoto that he's been summoned to fulfill his parents' promise to give up one of their children to the goddess to be summoned into another world. Makoto asks him why he has to do such a thing, and Tsukuyomi tells him his parents are also from another world. Before they gave birth to him, they begged the goddess to take them to Earth, and in return, they would surrender Makoto to the goddess when he came of age. Tsukuyomi only appeared to Makoto to hold up his end of the deal. Makoto, after hearing all this, accepts his fate and lets Tsukuyomi do the needful. Tsukuyomi transports Makoto to the other world with lots of heroic qualities and powers. After bestowing all the powers Makoto needs to survive in the other world, including magic, Tsukuyomi transports him to see the impulsive goddess herself. On getting to her chambers, the goddess makes fun of Makoto and gives him her own blessing, which is the ability to speak any language except that of humans. When she's done with her evil deed, the goddess throws Makoto into the new world. As he falls several thousands of feet down to the new world, Tsukuyomi appears mid-air and holds him afloat. He explains a few more things about Makoto's powers to him, and then lets him freefall gently to begin his adventure in the other world. Makoto gets up and finds himself in a vast wasteland. He begins his search for civilization and wanders the wastelands for 3 whole days. Just as he's about to give up, he hears someone asking for help. He tracks the sound and follows the source to find a Shei orc trapped and about to be eaten by a 2-headed monster. Makoto rushes and effortlessly defeats the monster, scaring and saving the orc in the process, who tries to escape him. Makoto blocks her and introduces himself. He notices her fear of his powers and calms her down. When she's settled, the orc introduces herself as Emma and tells him about her sad life. It turns out she's to be offered as a sacrifice to the great dragon in a few days' time. Makoto notices the nice aura around her and decides to save her from being sacrificed before following her to her settlement. There, Makoto is given food which he munches like a crocodile on steroids. Emma makes sure to serve him more food as he eats his fill. While eating his meat, Makoto notices Emma using a levitation spell to transport things around. He asks her about it, and she tells him it's just magic. Makoto then asks her to teach him magic, and she agrees. Once he's done eating, Emma takes Makoto to a spot and teaches him how to create a fireball. She does her demonstration and asks Makoto to try it out. When he does, he produces the largest fireball that creates a dent in their cave. Emma measures his magic level afterwards and gets disappointed as it measures level 1. The following day, Makoto leaves the orc settlement after writing a letter to Emma to search for and defeat the great dragon so Emma doesn't have to sacrifice again. He treads through the wastelands and takes a little rest before continuing on his journey. He then tests out his magic again and summons a flaming arrow and a bow. Then he shoots a fiery arrow at one of the great dragons, Akashen's altar, destroying the worshippers there. The worshippers meet their demise and emit a red mist after they're gone. Just then, the great dragon Shen appears to fight Makoto. However, Makoto, who's already seen through most of the attacks, dodges them all and beats down the dragon with a series of insane punches. After getting enough punches for the day, Shen puts Makoto in his infamous memory box and takes a peek at Makoto's memories. He spectates the time when Makoto shriveled in his pants as a girl crushing on him, Hasegawa, asked him out. Shen laughs at his cowardice and gets a look at Makoto's other juicy memories. Makoto realizes he's in a genjutsu and snaps himself back to reality. He gets a more refined understanding of his powers and creates a zone around him where only he can manipulate them. He uses this power to break himself out of Shen's zone and prepares for round 2. Shen curls up and begs him for a ceasefire. When Makoto accepts, he then asks the hero to form a contract with him. Makoto takes a few minutes to think about it, but Shen's persuasion makes him accept the terms and conditions. In a matter of minutes, Shen signs a contract with Makoto and becomes his servant. This time, he transforms into a beautiful heroine with good bodily features, if you know what I mean. After getting Shen on his side, Makoto asks her why she's taking a human form. Makoto tells him it's because he won her fair and square in their fight. The rules mandate the loser to take on the form of their new master after the contract is formed. After some small talk, Shen asks her master if she could take him somewhere. Makoto gives her his permission and she transports both of them into a demi-plane using a mist portal. On getting inside the plane, both Shen, the creator of the plane, and Makoto get confused as the demi-plane is supposed to be dark and unsightly compared to the bright, evergreen land it turned out to be. The duo try out some persimmons and enjoy the landscape. After sightseeing the beautiful demi-plane, Makoto tells Shen to take them back to the land of the orcs to clear up the misunderstanding they had with them. Shen transports herself and Makoto back to the real world and finds Emma running towards them. Apparently, she was rushing to come and warn Makoto of fighting the dragon. When she finds out he's already defeated the dragon, she faints from happiness. That night, the villagers throw a huge party to celebrate Makoto's victory over Shen, the great dragon. Shen is seen drinking excessive amounts of ale as she discusses something with one of the orcs there. At one point in their discussion, she asks the orc if they would like to come to live in their fertile demiplane lands. The following morning, the orcs all pack their belongings and get ready to leave their lands for the good land in the demiplane. Makoto finds out too late and confronts his servant for going behind his back and bringing the orcs along with them. However, Shen divides herself into another Yumber fragment and argues with her master. Together, with the help of the orcs, Shen manages to convince Makoto to accept the deal. When he does, she transports all the orcs on the land to her demiplane. Almost as soon as they get there, the orcs begin building another settlement in the rich lands of the demiplane. Several days later, while Makoto practices his magic elements, Shen takes a dive into his memories to watch a historical drama movie. Makoto notices her getting too excited about his memories and stops her from doing so. Shen thinks long and hard about what to do and comes up with a way to threaten her master into letting her watch the things in his head play out. After he agrees to let her watch, Shen gets bored and decides to step out and look for materials she'll need to make a TV so she can watch easily. When she's out, Makoto checks a memory about his parents and promises to follow the path they both followed to eternity. Just outside the outskirts of the orc settlement, a dwarf gets chased and attacked by the black disaster spider. Not so far away from where he was, Makoto finds two orcs having trouble cutting down a large tree. He steps in and uses his powers to slash the tree in half before handing it over to the orcs. He then heals the wounds of one of the orcs and continues his journey. Up next, Makoto settles down somewhere to rest a bit. He finds his blood dripping and tries to heal himself, all to no avail. Just then, Shen shows up with an unconscious dwarf. Makoto asks her how she got to know him, and she says he was attacked by the black disaster giant spider. Speaking of the devil, the spider arrives a few moments later and attacks Makoto. Makoto's fear of spiders clouds his fighting abilities, and he runs helter-skelter from the webs the spider spun at him. When he gets back to his senses, he uses his fire powers to cut down the limbs and head of the spider. To his surprise, however, the spider kept on regenerating and becoming stronger. At one point in the battle, the spider traps Makoto on a tree and begins sucking its blood. A switch flips in Makoto's head and he turns into the spider's worst nightmare. He burns the spider to a crisp and faints from exhaustion. Still, the spider regenerates itself and fondles Makoto. Shen arrives and collects her master from him. With Makoto still unconscious, she somehow talks the spider into making a contract with Makoto. The spider transforms back into a human being and follows them home. Makoto wakes up a few hours later to find a strange, cute, and dangerous new girl who introduces herself as the Black Spider to him. The Black Spider introduces herself to Makoto and tells him how he was healed from his wounds. Makoto gets very surprised and scared at the same time that Shen made a contract with the Black Spider without his consent. When he's fully awake, Makoto gets to see his people again. Shen and the Black Spider up to their master's side. However, the dwarf they saved earlier also shows up and introduces himself as Elder, a dwarf skilled in crafting noble robes and sacred artifacts. He explains further, telling Makoto about the curse he lifted off the Black Spider after returning her to her original form. He makes a humble request to Makoto, asking him to allow his people to live on their land in the demi-plane. Just as Makoto is about to accept without any conditions, Shen butts in and tells the dwarf all the conditions they need to meet up to live in the demi-plane. The dwarf has no problem with this, so he sets off to get back to his people. After a full recovery, Makoto steps outside the demi-plane to search for humans. On this day, his search is fruitless, and he's called back inside the demi-plane by Shen. On getting back, Shen and the Black Spider ask Makoto to give them names. Makoto reluctantly names Shen Tomo. As for the spider, he names her Mio. Both ladies glow as they love the names their master just gave them. Up next, Makoto presents himself as the young master to the new citizens of the demi-plane. His two servants cast a vote to decide which title suits him the most. After deciding to call him Young Master, each colony begins introducing themselves. First, the dwarves present their chief elder, who introduces himself and pledges his loyalty to Makoto's rule. Next up, the mist lizards from Shen, or Tomo's faction, present themselves to join the demi-plane. Thirdly, Mio shows Makoto her clan of alchuminoid spiders and forces them to introduce themselves to their new masters. After the necessary introductions, Makoto ends the meet and greet, then rushes off the stage to continue his search for a human settlement. He's lucky this time as he finds a beautiful lady somewhere in the wastelands. He approaches her and tries to talk to her. However, the lady sees something else and runs for dear life. Confused, Makoto follows the lady to her settlement and finds a group of soldiers waiting to send him away. Makoto tries to communicate with them, but since the goddess made him unable to speak with humans, they couldn't understand him. Makoto rushes back to the demi-plane cussing at the goddess for his misfortune. Back in the demi-plane, Emma and his two other servants reveal the reason why Makoto looked so scary to the humans earlier. They tell him about the cloak of mana hovering around his body. To the humans, this makes him look like a demon king. Makoto promises to work on this deformity and appear normal to the humans. Over the next few weeks and even months, Makoto learns all he can about the human language, common, and even tries getting the dwarf elder to make him a ring to suppress his powers. The first ring fails, but as time goes on, the dwarf craftsman creates a ring that can suppress enough mana. Makoto also learns to display the human common language while walking. He is very happy as he leaves for the human town the very next day with his servants. On getting to the town of Zetsuya, Makoto and his people make their way to the Adventurers Guild to register as adventurers. The attendant finds their dress weird and makes some snide remarks about them. Following the small talk, the attendant explains the power levels at the guild and their significance. She also mentions the rewards they'll be getting once they complete their missions. Now all that's left is to measure their power levels. Tomo and Mio both measure power levels much higher than 1000. Makoto, on the other hand, only gets 1 power level. After registering themselves at the guild, Makoto and his servants get to the inn around town to rent a room for the night. The receptionist tries to dupe them but soon succumbs to a heavenly power after much pressure. Makoto and his servants, after settling down in their rooms, get back to town to get something to eat. While in town, Makoto and his servants sense people following them. They wait until nighttime to lure out their followers and teach them a lesson. When night comes, Makoto and Mio pretend to be 2 drunk lovers, so the followers underestimate them. However, they get shocked when a street kid approaches them to ask for help. Makoto and Mio are surprised to see a child roaming the streets. Mio rudely asks the child about her origins, but Makoto scolds her and gets closer to the child. The girl, who calls herself Rainan, tells Makoto that she's on a quest. When asked what the quest was about, she cries and hugs Makoto. Makoto then decides to take the girl back to the demi-plane, not knowing that someone was watching them from behind a corner. Makoto takes Rainan to his room in the inn and finds out that the little girl was working with a crime boss in their town of Zetsuya to free her captured sister and hopefully return to their home. At that moment, Tomo finds a group of thieves trying to steal their wagon. She catches up to them and executes all except one of them, whom she captured and brought to her master. Makoto scolds Tomo for killing all the criminals and sentences to a 1-hour lecture with him. Rainan interrupts their conversation and asks for some food. Makoto gives her Tomo's food and also gets to see a sketch of Rinan's sister. Makoto's mood changes after noticing how similar Rinan's sister is to his sweetheart back in the real world. Later that night, Mio returns from her outing and finds her master and Tomo peering into the memories of the criminal Tomo captured earlier. After getting her exact location, Makoto orders his servants to infiltrate the prison and free Rinan's sister. The duo hesitate to follow the orders initially, but soon succumb to their master's demands after seeing his serious face. After they're gone, he keeps wondering if Rinan's sister is Hasegawa's doppelganger. On their way to the prison, Mio and Tomo talk about their master's memories. Mio gets jealous at Tomo was being able to see their master's memories so easily. Eventually, they cut off their talk as dawn approaches. By morning, Makoto and Rinan ride their wagon into town to deliver some merchandise. On their way there, Rinan narrates her sob story, telling Makoto how she and her sister fell into the hands of the most powerful and arrogant adventurer in all of Zetsuya. Elsewhere, Rinan's sister To explains the reason behind her fighting. According to her narration, she entered the wastelands and brought tragedy on herself and her sister, just because she wanted to restore her family's honor. Just as she's about to zone out, Tomo and Mio appear to her and break her out of the cell she's in. They plan to sneak To out of the cell, but they're caught, unfortunately, by Mills Ace, the most powerful adventurer. While riding through town, Rinan spots one of Ace's henchmen. She ditches her ride and sneaks to an alleyway to meet with him. Makoto uses his locator spell to fish out the building she's in and eavesdrops on the conversation. Turns out the boss wants her to steal from Makoto despite his kindness towards her. Rinan asks if there could be another way, but the boss tells her she has no choice. After sending Rinan off, the henchman returns to his boss, Mills Ace. He finds Mills in a face-off with Tomo and Mio and recognizes them as the adventurers who exceeded level 1000. Mills smiles and asks them to join his team, only to get no as an answer. Mills then proceeds to insult Makoto and angers the girls. They unleash a powerful magic attack on him, but he blocks it with his magic barrier. The girls get serious with the boys and pummel all of them to oblivion. When they're done, they find out they've already destroyed about half of the entire town of Zetsuya. Rather than reflect on their actions, the girls get into another argument and decide to let out their frustration on the rest of the town. Together, Mio and Tomo both level the entire town of Zetsuya to the ground. Rainan is soon reunited with her sister and has Makoto and his 2 disgruntled servants to thank. After putting the sisters to sleep, Makoto punishes his servants for leveling the city. He ties them up and shoots them back into the demi-plane. After Makoto's servants learn their lesson, Makoto leaves the destroyed Zetsuya for a military base. There he spots a soldier telling the attendant about the horrible things that befell Zetsuya. Makoto stands silent as he watches the soldier tell the attendant about the monsters that attacked the city and destroyed it. It's then revealed that Makoto had altered the memories of everyone in Zetsuya so they don't remember what truly happened that day. Once the soldier's done with his story, the soldier tells the attendant that Tomo and Mio saved the city with their level 1000 powers. The attendant refuses to believe Makoto's servants are at such an insane level. Makoto steps in and shows her proof. Then he steps over to Tomo and gives her punishment. Makoto sentences her to several days on a mission known as Knight Errantry. Driven by the drive to hone her skills, Tomo blindly follows her master's order and leaves to find her way. Mio, on the other hand, is just happy to finally be alone with her master. On their way back to the demi-plane, Rhiannon chats a little bit about Mio's feelings for Makoto. Makoto ignores them and keeps riding the chariot until they come across some red bees. Makoto asks Mio to do the needful, and she takes down the entire swarm in less than a minute. The travelers get down the chariot and harvest materials from the bees. Once they're done, they continue their journey for days on end, camping by nighttime and anytime they get tired. 3 days later, they run into some ruby eye monsters. Makoto asks Mio to do the needful. However, Mio protests and asks her master to do it himself. Makoto finds out the monster's weak points from the people and gets down to finish them off. Since he's a level 1 adventurer, the travelers all wait for his demise as they feel he's too weak. Makoto shocks them when he takes down all the monsters in a few shots. The travelers get down the chariot and begin harvesting materials to sell in the market. After gathering the materials they need, they finally get to the next town of Sage. There, Makoto and his team get registered as adventurers and get to check for any special quests. He finds one from the Rembrandt Trading Company and discovers that they need some ruby-eyed monsters. He quickly gathers the remains from the travelers, exchanges contact with them for a meal later before parting ways with them. That night, Makoto meets with his people at the butcher's shop to have some good meat. Makoto tastes the meat there at the shop and finds out it's actually good meat. He munches on the roast like a caveman and gets to know the other travelers he came to Sage with. Hazel is the drunk alchemist in the team, Louisa is the gunner, and Renina is the priest knight who challenges Makoto to an arm wrestle and loses for the first time in her life. Mio, however, focuses on getting more meat for herself and her master. After the introductions, Louisa tells Makoto about the terrible rumors she's heard about the Rembrandt Company. Bad things always happen to adventurers who help them. Anyways, Mio prepares herself for a nightstand with her master that day. However, she's disappointed when she finds out her master slept on another bed. Sigma male move. The next day, Makoto takes himself and Mio back to the demi-plane to begin starting a trading company there. Emma doesn't approve of this idea and she lets him know fair and square. Makoto tells her he'll rethink setting up the company there and then begins to check all around the demi-plane. He finds out about the new residential places for the Alk, Orcs, and Dwarves and also finds out they were building a castle for him too. Emma tells Makoto they've been using some of Makoto's memories to set up workflow processes. At that moment, the Eld Dwarf rushes towards them and invites Makoto to come to check out the special armor the dwarves made for him. After checking all of them out, Makoto refuses to pick one. Just as he's about to give up, he spots a full-on coat and trousers outfit that can change colors and boost his abilities. Makoto jumps into the outfit and begins running around. Up next, he meets up with a few Alks and checks out the poisonous items they got from the forests. The following day, Makoto gets out of the demi-plane and makes his way to the Rembrandt Trading Company. There, he meets with the leader who refuses to say a word to him. At the Sage Adventurers Guild, the top adventurer in the guild, Line Latte, investigates a little to find out who this masked new scoundrel is. He finds out the person is Makoto and pledges to end him very soon. In the mansion of Patrick Rembrandt, the representative of the Rembrandt Trading Company meets with Makoto and finds out about his background, including the fact that he's a level 1 adventurer with no experience whatsoever. Makoto tells Rembrandt his plans of merging his own trading company with Patrick's so they can work towards a common goal. Seeing his status, Rembrandt, however, declines the requests and talks down on Makoto's strength and abilities. Rembrandt gets the shock of his life when Makoto takes out the remnants of the ruby-eyed monster and presents it to him. He quickly changes his bias on Makoto and tells him the real reason why he needs the eyes. He tells him he wishes to create a special medicine, ambrosia from the ruby eyes, so he can cure his wife and daughter of a cursed disease. Makoto offers to help and even tells them he has an alchemy master who can help them out. He then brings out more ruby-eyed monsters and gains his favor. Rembrandt gives him a signed receipt and sends him back to the guild with his approval. On getting back to the guild, Makoto finds out he has to pass 2 tests to join the guild. The attendant there underestimated his brain power and gave him a cheat book to study before the test. Makoto checks out the book and finds out the questions are for 8th graders in the real world. He pays for the test and takes it right there. To everyone's surprise, he passes with flying colors. Makoto's actually surprised at the dumbness of this era as those questions were easier than ever. The teacher decides to make his next test hell. He reads out a few things for him to get to pass his next test. Makoto thinks about the conditions and offers materials he already had with equal values to the one the teacher asked. The teacher passes him almost immediately, and Makoto gets his guild card that day. Amidst her night errantry, Tomo takes down giant crabs and sneaks them back to the demi-plane. She and the orcs cook up the delicious crab and eat it with them. While eating, one of the orcs rushes to tell her about seeing Mayo in Makoto's memory vault. Thinking about the vile things Mayo could be doing to her master's memory, Tomo rushes towards her and finds everything in order. Apparently, Mayo was just helping with the translation of their master's memories. Emma puts Tomo in a tight corner and urges her to join them in translating. Tomo reluctantly joins Mio and does a little translating. While at it, the duo argues about their master's memories and how they would spend some time alone with him. Makoto, on the other hand, is seen in a diner at Sage, having trouble over which drink to take. After choosing his order, he overhears two adventurers talking about a giant crab someone had taken down earlier. Makoto takes note and gets his drink, which turns out to be bad. He decides to return to the plane and get some food. He finds Shen's or Tomo's fragment, steals some persimmons, and joins her to eat them. They discuss the bad weather, and Makoto thinks of a way to nip this problem in the bud. He talks out a few of his plans and then gets screamed at by Tomo, who telepathically asks him to come save her from Mayo in the memory vault. Makoto rushes to the vault and finds Tomo and Mio fighting over one of his memories. Makoto finds out what's happening from one of the Alk there and separates them from the fight. He orders them to keep their voice down and then hears the problem from both ends. When he's done judging the situation, he finds out they were fighting over a boring anime he had watched in the real world. He sighs a little bit and then sentences Tomo to another boring lecture with him. Later on, Makoto and the girls get back to the inn in Sage to continue their mission. There, they discuss Rembrandt's company before going to sleep. Seeing as there are two beds, Makoto opts to sleep on the sofa. However, his two servants have other plans to keep him to themselves for the night. While they scheme their evil plans, Makoto receives a message from Hazel the alchemist to help in creating the ambrosia drug. The following morning, he begins to work with Hazel. While they walk the streets, Ladi and his henchmen watch them from a corner as they cook up a plan to destroy Rembrandt's trading company. A few days later, Rembrandt and his butler Morris are seen torturing a man till he dies in their hands. Later on, Makoto and Hazel arrive at the mansion to begin the synthesis of the ambrosia drug. Hazel gets cold feet seeing as he's at the place of a very powerful person. However, Rembrandt calms him down as they move towards the lab to begin synthesizing the drug. Rembrandt explains the entire process to Hazel and allows the alchemist to begin the synthesis with an incantation. The incantation takes a bit too long, so Makoto helps shorten it. When he's done, they begin synthesizing the drug. Morris stays with them all through the experiment until they produce the first dosage of the drug. Hazel nearly spills the drug, but Makoto helps him up and takes the drug to Rembrandt. On getting to the living room, they find Rembrandt lying down injured. Puzzled, Makoto asks Rembrandt what happened, and he tells him his feral wife and daughters attacked him when he tried to administer the drug to them. Makoto sees that their ferocity might turn out to be a problem, so he tells Rembrandt to take him to his wife and daughters. Initially, Rembrandt underestimates him, but Makoto reassures him that he won't be defeated by some cursed monsters. Rembrandt takes Makoto to his family quarters. Makoto faces the wife first. However, he pins her down and forces the drug down her throat. Almost immediately, the wife is healed. He does the same with the second daughter and heals her in no time. When he gets to the third daughter, he finds out she still retains a bit of her humanity as the daughter keeps telling him to stay away from her. When she attacks him, Makoto holds her down and heals her up. After taking care of his family, Rembrandt personally thanks Makoto and asks for his real identity. Makoto tells him he's just a normal adventurer. Rembrandt expresses his gratitude one more time and lets him go. Outside the mansion, Makoto runs into his two stubborn servants. While they discuss and catch up, Lime and his henchmen pull up a surprise attack on the trio. Luckily for them, they detect Lime before it's too late and dodge the attack. Tomo tells her master she sensed them following him back in town. She then asks him what to do in this case as Lime was already calling his reinforcements hiding in the woods. First of all, Makoto asks Mio to leave the fight as soon as possible to avoid annoying Tomo during the fight. Mio politely obliges and sits out the fight. Unsuspecting Tomo gets very happy and readies herself for the fight. Lime's men attack first and Makoto dodges them all. Tomo, on the other hand, waits for her master's call. When he does give her the go-ahead to start the fight, Tomo pummels most of them in just a few moves. Now Lime and his henchmen are left behind. The henchman tries to escape the fight, but Makoto holds him down. After capturing the two of them, they begin their interrogation. Tomo peeks into Lime's memories and finds an orphanage as one of the most important ones there. When asked to talk, Lime confirms that his faction was the one who placed the cursed disease on Rembrandt's family. However, things weren't supposed to get this bad as they only wanted to teach Rembrandt a lesson for being a very bad boss. Makoto checks that he's telling the truth and sends him back to tend to his wounded friends. Lime tends to his friends and gets back to the Rembrandt mansion to tender his apology. Rembrandt and his butler accept his apologies and tell him his punishment. Lime tells them not to worry, that he'll be retiring from the guild immediately. Up next, Tomo meets up with Lime at the orphanage he swore to protect and asks him to work for her as a spy. Lime listens to Tomo's offer and considers it very okay and beneficial to him, so he accepts the job without worry and begins working immediately. Tomo gives him his first paycheck, which is 1,000 gold pieces, and gets him fully on board. When she's done with that, she sneaks back to the Rembrandt mansion to find out what evil things they were planning. She overhears Rembrandt and his butler planning to spy on Makoto and then leaves shortly. Makoto and his servants return to the demi-plane only to find out they're going to get their hands full for a while. While at lunch, Makoto finds out from Emma, the orc, that the warriors undergoing training in the demi-plane are in despair over their abilities. Apparently, they fear they may never meet up with Makoto and his servants in terms of power. Tomo condemns them for behaving that day and gets into another argument with Mayo, who's not so fond of her words. Makoto steps in and tells Mayo and Tomo to talk to the lake and lizardmen respectively. When they're done eating, Makoto and his henchmen get to the forest near them to listen in on a few orcs having a picnic. He confirms his suspicions as the orcs complain about their master being too powerful for them to handle and defeat. Makoto thinks about his last battle with the orcs and remembers that he actually held back from obliterating them completely. He leaves the orcs and discovers Mayo eating some tomatoes for the first time. Tomo also joins them later on and gives Makoto an update on her discussion with the lizardmen. She tells Makoto that the lizardmen are scared to work together with the orcs and train together. While Makoto thinks of a solution, Tomo gets an idea and decides to try it out. In their next meeting with the orcs and lizardmen, Tomo pits the two strongest warriors from each clan against each other. Aegir's represents the orcs and Liddy represents the mist lizards. The matchup begins and ends in Aegir's favor. Makoto remains expressionless as he watches the entire fight play out in front of him. It's all part of Makoto's plan. After the fight, the two fighters face their master. Makoto speaks first, telling the crowd to forget about their differences and work together to be better and reliant. From then on, an arena match would be held where a random member from either clan would be made to fight against the other. This should make them eager to work together and discover their individual strength so they can be ranked. Once she's done with the speech, Makoto was called upon to give his final speech. He says a few things and retouches the matter before ending the meeting. Next up, Makoto and his servants get back to the Adventurers Guild in Sage to register themselves there. The attendant there is shocked after finding out the power levels of Makoto's servants. She asks if they could train the rookies in the meantime as they're dangerously low on personnel to help with that. Makoto agrees to help and asks Tomo to do that for him. Tomo reluctantly agrees to help him and gets on with it. She figures out To's on the team her master asked her to train and wonders how interesting things will be for them. Up next, Tomo begins the training with the rookie group of adventurers. She takes them through very rigorous training and ends the day by making them fight some large and dangerous gorillas. The group asks for a timeout to talk to their trainer. Tomo puts a barrier on the gorillas and tells her trainees to grow past their weaknesses and work as a team to take down the big bad gorillas. The team gets into even more despair, but Tomo decides to give them a cheat strategy to beat the gorillas. She tells Hazel to lay a trap of muddy water. Louisa would pour paralyzing poison into the mud, and the archer shoots arrows at the gorillas. This strategy proves very effective as it helps them defeat all the gorillas. Nonetheless, one other gorilla is left standing, but Tomo quickly suffocates it and finishes it off. When they're done, they get to the next location and defeat the gorillas they find there. After training for the day, Tomo tells her team that they only pass her test as worthy adventurers if they can develop a strategy and take down a den filled with bad gorillas the very next day. The trainees are shell-shocked as they begin thinking about their next move. The following day, they set out to find a den of gorillas. Some hours later, they return with a bag full of gorilla tails. This shocks the entire guild as the rookies become legends in just one day. Elsewhere, Makoto gives Mayo another job to go search for Ambroise's flowers in the deadly forest of Tinarak while he opens their new trading company. Mayo accepts the job and begins her journey. Makoto gets to Rembrandt and asks him to rent him some space in his real estate to set up his shop. Rembrandt knows Makoto's planning to spy on him, but he still tries to find him a spot in his establishment. Keep your enemies closer. After his meeting with Rembrandt, Makoto gets back to the demi-plane and discusses his meeting with Rembrandt with his servants over lunch. Apparently, Rembrandt had told him of a neutral city where he could set up his shop without having to worry about regulations and the like. Mayo takes some adventurers and gets to Tinarak Forest. As they pass through the deadly forest, they fail to realize that they're being watched. The two people watching Mayo and her squad reveal themselves after they're gone. They begin following Mayo and her team's tracks, hoping to get them later on. Meanwhile, Makoto's people throw a party to celebrate the establishment of Makoto's trading company. At the party, Makoto gives a half-assed speech and begins the celebrations. Tomo's fragment serves him some food to eat, and he gives her a pat on her head. Since they're the same body, Tomo feels the same effect on her forehead. Mayo notices this and becomes very jealous of them both. She tries to get their master away from Tomo, but Tomo quickly intervenes and pulls her away. Makoto gets to talk with an Alk who would stay in her transformed state for long periods. She expresses her gratitude to their master for his graciousness and gives him a brief update on the state of affairs before leaving. When she's gone, Liddy, the lizard man who fought in the arena earlier on, meets with his master. He tells him a little about the progress he's making at training before leaving. Makoto ends the meet and greet session and hears from the dwarves. Eld, one of the older dwarves, tells his master about the interesting weapons he's heard the humans make themselves. Makoto grants him the responsibility of watching over their new shop so he can experiment and make new weapons for the team. Following his meeting with the dwarf, an orc walks by and thanks his master for giving him such a nice job to do. Elsewhere, Mayo and Tomo discuss their young master, telling each other to take things easy with him. They suddenly sense their master nearby and begin to fret. Tomo and her partner, Mio, trace their master's scent and find him practicing with the bow at a range he hastily created. They confront him and ask him how he's still alive. Apparently, they thought he was dead or something because he seemed to transfer his consciousness to the target when he was practicing the bow and arrow. Mio keeps the waterworks coming as she thinks she's actually seeing her master's ghost. Tomo, on the other hand, analyzes Makoto's mana and commends his mana growth. Makoto freaks out as he begins to think his mana absorption rings stopped working. He asks Tomo if she could see the Demon King's aura around him again. However, Tomo tells him that she doesn't see such mana around him. Instead, she sees tremendous amounts of mana on par with that of the goddess. Makoto gets irritated as he hates the goddess's guts. He then uses his Kai to conceal his mana back and continues petting Mio. Tomo, however, gets a little pissed at her master for being that strong. Being the warrior she is, she decides to enjoy the moment while it lasts. The next day, Makoto gets back to Sage to check his shop out. He walks aimlessly in the streets wondering what to do as his brain fog gets in his way of thinking. Apparently, the girls couldn't let him sleep the previous night from all their arguments and ranting. While he walks, he senses a bag flying towards him. A demihuman rushes over to pick up his bag, thanks him, and continues on his merry way. Makoto turns his head and lands it on a beautiful woman's chest. Sadly for him, his servants catch him staring at the melons on the woman's chest and drag him back to their hotel room. They both trap him in a corner and prepare themselves to do the bed thing with him. In other words, they were preparing to grape him. Makoto tries to reason with them, but his words fall on deaf ears. After they rip his clothes off, Makoto uses his powers to chase them away and teleport back to the demi-plane. Back in the demi-plane, Emma finds him hanging on a tree and takes him to the dwarf to get a change of clothes. Mio tracks her master to the dwarf's shop and apologizes to him for her weird behaviors earlier. Makoto then asks her to accompany him to find the new species of ambrosia flowers. Mio gets flustered and jumps at the offer. Together, Makoto and Mio get to the Tinarek forest. As they get closer to the flowers, they sense a few amateur adventurers following them behind. Mio ties them up with her silk as they both get into a flower field. Makoto holds her master's hands as they inch closer to the real flower species. They meet the two weirdos tracking Mio earlier on and ask them what they're really after. Mio gets really pissed about them interrupting her golden moment with Makoto. She loses control a little bit and prepares to fight the two people in front of her. One of them, however, questions them a little bit about their smell, and then begins to attack both of them. Mio, Makoto, and their amateur stalkers earlier all run for dear life as the two weirdos keep firing arrows at them. Makoto takes his people to a safe place and calls Tomo to help him with a strategy to defeat their attackers. Tomo tells her master to create a smokescreen to blind the attackers so she can bring the rookies back to the demi-plane. Makoto acknowledges her plan and asks her how he can bring the deranged Mio back to normal. Tomo tells him to feed Mio her favorite food, which is his blood. Makoto realizes the truth in her words. As the attackers approach them, Mio creates a smokescreen and sends the adventurers to the demi-plane just like Tomo said. Then he slashes his palm and feeds Mio his blood. The attackers just stand there wondering why this mysterious man is feeding the girl his blood. When they're done spectating, one of them pulls out his wand to create a free spell. However, Mio absorbs the mana around the attacker and dispels his spell. Makoto creates a blinding light and destroys their attackers' wands. The rookie adventurers end up getting summoned into the illusionary city between the real world and the demi-plane. Things get really confusing for them as they wonder where they are. Thankfully, Tomo and her fragments are there to guide them to the demi-plane. After their fight, Makoto and Mio come to terms with the two attackers named Aqua and Eris. The duo agrees to take Makoto to their secret settlement in the forest to meet the others and get their consent for the acquisition of the ambrosia flowers. On getting to the village, Makoto and Mio get to the Council of Elders of the Forest Ogres. Know the story, the village head explains to Makoto that they're a different breed from the elves as people often mistake them for such a species. While they discuss, Nildostori's son Adobo arrives to greet his guests. After introducing himself, they explain to Makoto why they have to keep hiding from their enemies. Makoto understands their point and just keeps mute. When asked about his identity, Makoto tells Adono they're just merchants in search of the ambrosia flower. The meeting ends there and Makoto is taken to his room alongside Mio. Makoto is seen discussing with Aqua and Eris in his room when their master, Mondo, busts a hole in the wall and introduces himself to Makoto. He shakes hands with the mysterious merchant and gets a good feel of his magic powers. Mio gets pissed at Mondo for holding her master's hands and punches him several feet behind. While on the floor, Mondo wonders why Makoto suppresses his powers so much. He promises to make Makoto regret coming there. In the meantime, Makoto asks Mio to help him investigate Adono and Mondo as he senses something weird with them. Mayo happily accepts the job and sinks into the ground. There, she thinks about her master's anxiousness and hopes there's nothing more to it. She senses Mondo walking the forest and decides to take a sneak peek at him. She checks the mana around it and attributes it to the earth element. A few seconds later, she telepathically intercepts a discussion between Adono and Mondo. Apparently, they were secretly working for a demon. Hours later, the village throws a party to honor Makoto and Mayo for their visit. While the party is on, Makoto spots Adono attacking Mondo. Suddenly, a demon in a black cloak and fiery mana appears and the two go unconscious. Makoto approaches the Lich demon and asks what his deal is. The demon is surprised at Makoto for being able to withstand his powerful mana. He decides to attack Makoto with his dark magic, but Makoto absorbs the magic and consumes all of the demon's magic. Tomo arrives at the village and Makoto takes him to the ground. She meets with Nildo Story, who seems to have forgotten all about her. She gives him a few pointers and he finds out she's actually the great dragon Shen. Tomo, however, tells her people to show Makoto some respect instead, as he's her master. Later on, Makoto and his servants begin questioning the demon. When asked what his true objective is, the demon tells Makoto that he plans on becoming a Grant in the near future so he can travel between worlds. He insults Makoto a little bit and almost gets slashed in the throat. Makoto approaches the demon in a friendly manner and asks him to teach him some dark magic. The demon was shocked as he didn't know what to tell Makoto. Tomo comes up with an interesting concept and asks her master to form a contract with the demon so they can help each other. Makoto helps the demon become a Grant, and in return, the demon teaches him dark magic. Makoto begins the contract ritual. Elsewhere in the demi-plane, the rookie adventurers contemplate stealing the treasures of the demi-plane. Meanwhile, Makoto finishes his contract and transforms the skeleton demon into a Giga Chad. The demon stands up in his new form and appreciates his master for his help. Tomo begins contemplating visiting the memory vault to get some things when she suddenly collapses and begins spitting out blood. Makoto gets very alert and begins tending to his wounded servant. Apparently, someone had triggered an explosion around the barriers Tomo placed around the demi-plane's outskirts. The resulting damage had some effect on Tomo's physique. After placing her in the right care, Makoto and Shiki, the former demon and his latest servant, rush towards the location of the explosion to investigate. Shiki runs out of energy on his way and asks Makoto to let him heal the wounded people instead. Makoto gives him the go-ahead and Shiki uses his healing powers to heal the fatally injured. Makoto finds some unconscious demihumans in really bad shape. He is very worried about their well-being and hopes they're still alive. He casts his own healing magic to heal one of the wounded soldiers and eventually revives him. When he's done, he finds his own mana suspended in the air. While he wonders how that happened, an orc comes bearing bad news. Apparently, Shen's fragment and an orc were there at the point of the explosion. Sadly, they lost their lives. Makoto gets to the exact location of the explosion and finds remnants of a mist gate. He puts his hands on the other end of the mist gate and feels the presence of another adventurer on the other side. As he touches the adventurer, he begins to see the memories of the woman with beautiful melons that he crashed into a few weeks back. So it turns out the woman actually caused the death of the orc and Shen's fragment, as Makoto sees herself and her crew harassing the orcs in the illusionary city. Makoto gets super annoyed at the way the woman treated his own demihumans. He opens a mist gate and appears in front of the pesky adventurer woman. The woman, who's just barely injured, gets really scared when she sees Makoto's expressionless face. She tries slashing him with her sword, but Makoto keeps getting closer to her. He says a few words of regret to her, cuts both her hands, and then slits her throat. After ending the bully's life, Makoto accidentally shed tears, for this is his first time. The next day, a memorial service is held for the orc and Shen's fragments who lost their lives. Makoto seems different as he gains a new perspective on the world. After the service, Makoto tells his servants about his experience earlier. Tomo's the one who sees memories, but he was able to see the adventurer's memories. "What's happening?" he said. Tomo laughs and tells him he was able to read it because of the deep trust they all had in each other. Mayo is jealous of the bond between Tomo and Makoto and shows it. Tomo keeps on teasing her until they get into a big argument. Later on, Makoto meets with Liddy, Emma, and another Alk to get updates on their current nation. He hears all he needs to hear and dishes out new orders for them to complete. Next up, Makoto gets to the Dwarven warehouse to inspect some of their latest weapons. When he's done, he goes on to pay his final respects to the families of the deceased orc. By nightfall, Makoto makes up his mind to finally do something about the demi-plane's future. He transports himself to Rembrandt's mansion in Sige to discuss setting up his business. Their meeting comes to a successful conclusion as Rembrandt finds a suitable land for him to start his business. He also writes a letter of recommendation for anybody looking to hire him. Makoto decides to pay him back by removing his mask and showing him his real face. Rembrandt and Morris chuckle at his simplicity and wish him a good day. Back in the demi-plane, Tomo and Mio complain about their master spending time with Shiki recently. Makoto ignores them and continues eating his lunch. When they're done, Makoto lets the girls know that he trusts Shiki's ability to study humans and that's why he's been following him. He gives both of his servants a book they can read to increase their abilities. The ladies are joyous about their gift as Makoto dishes out new jobs for them while he's away from the demi-plane. In his endless quest to study humans and the goddess, Makoto plans to enroll himself in the Sage Academy so he can learn more about humans. Some hours later, he takes Shiki with him and prepares a magic circle to teleport them both to Sage. Sadly, the goddess had other plans as she used that circle to teleport Makoto directly onto a battlefield. On getting there, two warriors approach him and slash two of his fingers off his hands. After receiving the attack, Makoto calms himself and carefully analyzes his enemies. He notices the two warriors' tremendous strength and thinks of a way to counter them without going all out on them. One of the warriors, Sophia, Aka the strongest adventurer ever, Aka the Dragon Slayer, launches another attack on him. Makoto steps back and dodges the attack and begins to question the warriors. He asks them why they were attacking him, seeing as he never for once quarreled with them. Sophia tells him they're warriors siding with the demon army in a war against the humans. Makoto uses his GPS spell to scan the area around him and finds several thousand demons waiting for Sophia's signal to attack. Makoto knows he has to fight these two warriors for real this time round. He releases a little bit of his power from his mana-absorbing rings or drop mirror and fires rapid-fire balls at his enemies. However, Mitsurugi, the other warrior, blocks the attacks and creates footholds for a partner to climb on and attack their enemy, Makoto. Again, Makoto dodges the attack and faces his enemies once again. Thinking they finally removed the goddess' protection from their enemy, Sophia prepares to launch another attack, but Makoto tells him he's not in any way affiliated with the goddess. He asks for their names and gets to know that they're some of the strongest adventurers ever seen in all of the human realm. After the introductions, Sophia and her partner find out that Makoto's just an ordinary merchant according to him. They refuse to believe his words and prepare another large attack on him. Makoto gets tired of the prolonged fight and removes some of his drop mirror rings. He summons a fiery bow and arrow and shoots it at his enemies. Sophia and Mitsurugi take a strong hit from the shot. Before they recuperate, Makoto fires another one. This time, it's a water-themed arrow. Sophia dodges the shot and gets behind Makoto, hoping to slash him with her powerful sword. On getting there, Makoto takes out one of the special weapons from the dwarves and cuts her sword in half. Sophia attaches herself to Makoto, takes him high up into the air, and then leaves him to free fall into the suspended icicles they place to puncture him. Makoto surprises him and destroys the whole terrain after removing all of his drop mirror rings. Sophia and Mitsurugi survive the attack, but they lose almost all their clothes in the process. Makoto passes out immediately only to wake up in the demi-plane some days later beside his servants. Meanwhile, Rembrandt gets a letter from one of his spies reporting the incident that happened earlier on the supposed battlefield. Makoto gets back in his suit and meets with all of his servants to discuss their next course of action. He keeps his resolve to travel alongside Shiki, decides to learn the basics of magic, so he can be better next time. Mayo and Tomo still complain about being left alone to take care of the demi-plane while he's gone. To soothe their minds, Makoto tells the girls that they're his trump cards and the only people he can rely on. Makoto clears things with the girls and prepares to leave for Sage. Before leaving, however, another fragment of Tomo Como arrives and greets her. Elsewhere on the demi-plane, Eris and Aqua join the fighters in the training camp. When she gets tired, Eris rushes to the bushes to eat some bananas. Makoto gets himself to Sage to begin his journey in the academy. In the meantime, Mio, Eld, and some others showcase the frivolities of their shop to the passerby humans in Sage. After seeing their products work, they get loads of customers in just one day. People are noticing the progress in Makoto's shop, including Rembrandt and Morris. Tomo, on the other hand, keeps supervising the shop and recalls how much the explosion affected the people and demons around him. That evening, he spends some time alone reminiscing about his people from the real world. He reassures them that he'll make them proud one day. Just then, Emma approaches him and gives him some updates on the demi-plane. As he walks back to his domain by nightfall, Shiki desperately calls for his help as Tomo and Mayo are fighting again.